You're listening to For the Fighter in You.
Xymogen and Whole Scripts medical director Dr. James Munro started his higher education at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, earning a degree in biology with a focus on pre-med studies. He then graduated from the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon, with a doctorate in naturopathic medicine. Completed his residency in integrative medicine at Progressive Medical in Atlanta, Georgia, and started his own self-named private practice, Dr. James Munro, LLC. Dr. Munro also currently serves as the medical director at Xymogen and Whole Scripts, helping to develop and produce professional formulas that provide quality supplements to healthcare practitioners. His dedication to providing top quality care, especially in chronic diseases related to the gut-brain axis, has led him to take the social media world by storm. As he imparts his wealth of knowledge, Dr. Munro shares his wisdom on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and previously wrote his own series of motivational blog posts on jamesistrying.com. I love that address, jamesistrying.com. He's become a true social influencer who cares deeply about helping people achieve their overall wellness goals. Dr. Munro, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're an ultra busy guy, and I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure and an honor. Great to talk to you.
You have a degree in naturopathic medicine. That's the ND degree. So probably the best place to start is, can you give us a differential between naturopathic medicine and allopathic medicine?
Yeah. So, well, there's a lot of differences, really. But there are the licensing laws surrounding NDs in the country vary, right? So if you go to an unlicensed state, Florida, for example, is currently unlicensed, which means anyone can really say that they're an ND or a naturopathic doctor. And that does not help the cause very much. Where if you go to places like Utah, Oregon, there's currently 25 or 26 licensed states. You can't just say that you're a naturopathic doctor. You have to go to medical school. You have to pass 2 sets of board exams. And the first 2 years of medical school is fairly similar between the MD and ND route. And the second 2 years is where things really change. I did a lot of nutritional and botanical medicine. We studied pharmaceutical medicine as well. And the difference really is kind of like the approach that we use. And we'll get into that, but it's really more focused on those natural, nutritional, herbal interventions, lifestyle interventions, those types of things. So in some states, essentially trained as primary care providers, that just has that more natural approach. And there's a lot of crossover. There's a lot of MDs that are doing a lot of the same things as NDs. And then there's also a lot of NDs that kind of go the other way, and they're just really focused more on pharmaceutical medications and things like that. So there's a lot of crossover, but they are distinct, different tracks. And I very much respect both of them, but my journey led me to this side of the story.
There's that classic story of, you talk to your friends who are MDs and you talk about nutrition and they say, and you say, well, out of 6, 8, 10, and 12 years of school, how much nutrition did you get? And they said, well, 2 weeks. I'm like, whoa, okay. So that kind of, for the people who are, I'm with you with totally respecting both sides. Like I get in a car accident and my rib is sticking out of my skin. I want an allopathic emergency medical technician to put that rib back in, stop the bleeding. I want, allopathic. But when it comes to prevention, and it comes to figuring out why something hurts so badly, or why I have brain fog, or why I'm nausea, not have nausea, that I need someone to tell me the root cause. I don't really want a pharmaceutical at that point. So, for the people here in Florida who just might not have access to a true naturopathic doctor for the reasons you had stated, and are wondering if you have that same issue that I had, where you start to feel like we're just kind of symptom chasing in this state and we're not really getting to the root cause. find a good licensed naturopathic doctor who has those West Coast credentials. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, totally. And that sort of puts NDs on a pedestal, because there are MDs that do that too. So it's really, I always say it doesn't really matter where that person came from. It's where they are right now. And
Right.
I've met amazing and terrible NDs, MDs, DOs. It's not the education that gets you there. It's the person. So it's not necessarily that you have to look for an ND. You have to look for someone that has that philosophy that you respect and trust, and that may or may not be an ND. It may or may not be an MD.
Yeah, well said. Well said. There are some tremendous MDs here in Tampa. I'm in the Tampa market, and there are some absolutely tremendous MDs who are very, very nutritionally focused and also allopathically focused. They're a really nice blend. And so, like you say, you have to hunt and peck. And for me, you know, it's a vibe thing. You go in, you already know a few things because you had to educate yourself, and you go in and you get a vibe on the person. You know, like, there's a lot to be said for intuition. There's a lot to be said for whether you get along well with the practitioner, whether you think that, you know, they are taking your whole body into account and your experiences. I've seen some of your wonderful videos, and you talk a lot about that. You talk about how important mood is, and experience, and all the other kind of intangibles that go along with total health.
Yeah, there's so much more to it. Like, the most annoying question that I hear is like, I have this, which supplement should I take? Like, no, that's not. I have no idea.
Magic
Probably
pill,
nothing.
right?
Probably
it's a
nothing.
Magic pill philosophy. That's
Yeah.
kind of how we've been educated, is like, what pill fixes what? This is broken, this hurts. And I don't want to talk about the food I'm eating or the beer I'm drinking. You know, I just want you to give me a pill. Give me a pill.
Just fix this thing where I don't have to do anything.
Right.
I mean, that would be awesome. I'd be super into that personally.
You'd be doing really well if you had one of those pills.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about where you're working right now, because this is really, really impressive. And how I got introduced to Xymogen is probably important. One of my very close friends and neighbors, who played drums in my band for a long time, had a compounding pharmacy here in Tampa, had a couple of compounding pharmacies, and he is a lifelong Xymogen user. He's, you know, been on Xymogen for probably 10 or 15 years at least. And I asked him, of course, as a compounding pharmacist who I trust very, very deeply, I said, Steve, what do you take? Because that's kind of the trick, isn't it? Find the guy who's healthy, find the guy who's a mad scientist, and say, what do you take? That's one of the. So I said, what do you take? He told me about Xymogen. And that is because your nutritional supplementation is pharmaceutical grade. So maybe you could tell us, like, what Xymogen is, first off, and why it's important, if it is, why it's important to make sure that your nutrition is pharmaceutical grade versus just something you're going to get off a shelf.
Yeah. So simply put, Xymogen is a nutraceutical supplement manufacturer. We design and make formulas, and we produce them in our facilities here. We have our own manufacturing facilities. And then kind of piggybacking on that, WholeScripts is the distribution platform. So that's a way that it's a really cool website where doctors can work with their patients directly. So they can send recommendations right there on the site and kind of have that conversation on the site, where we carry not just Xymogen products, but we've capped it out at 100 different third-party vendors that really those vendors came from our users. Our account said, like, this product is awesome. Have you heard of Biocidin? It's amazing. And Biocidin is a really great company. So we bring them on and we distribute them alongside the Xymogen products. So that's kind of that's where those two companies come together. And Xymogen being pharmaceutical grade, that is important because when it comes to producing and manufacturing supplements and nutraceuticals, there are lots of laws that you would assume. The FDA has lots of laws that they throw out there. You have to do it like this and like this, but they don't enforce those laws very well. And so it's largely a self-enforced environment. And it's really important that you work with a company that's doing it right. And Xymogen, there are others too. It's not like Xymogen is the only good supplement company out there. But there are companies that aren't doing it right. And that is evidenced by the fact that any given day you can look at it and find a news article saying like someone pulled this product off the shelf and it doesn't even have any magnesium, even though it's supposed to have 200 milligrams. Those types of things happen, and they happen because they're not following all of the laws that the FDA has put in place. There's a lot of regulations, but the FDA, maybe 20% of manufacturing facilities are actually audited by the FDA, and the other 80% never even looked at. So are they doing it right? I can tell you for a fact, many are not. Some are. And so we have third-party certifications. NSF is a really big one that we work with, and a lot of the better companies out there work with NSF. They have all of those same regulations, and to get certification, they come in and audit everything every 6 months. And that is important because they're going through all of our testing methods. They are grabbing our products and actually testing it and making sure it matches up with the labels and making sure all the claims are good, making sure we're doing everything correctly. And that's twice a year voluntarily. And we've never once had an issue with that certification. It's kind of like just a thing that happens. They come in, they say, once again, you guys are doing great. I should mention they spend about a week and a half or 2 weeks going through everything too. So it's not like they just stroll through. They go through everything and we just answer their questions, give them the documents they're looking for, and it's never been an issue. And then we have the FDA randomly audits some manufacturing facilities, and Xymogen is getting bigger these days. So they're kind of a bigger target. And pretty recently, the FDA came in. They were there for about 2 weeks going through everything. And they, at the end of it, they said, oftentimes they give you notes, observations, they call them. And these are things like you have to fix, and it's going to be an issue. Make sure you get this covered. We'll come back and check it out. We got 0 observations. And actually the FDA officer said, you probably won't hear from us for a while. It looks like you guys are doing it right. And so that's just kind of the level of things that we have at Xymogen. And that's why I'm there. So I can go into my story with how I actually got connected to Xymogen, if you want to hear that one.
Please do.
All right. So I was in clinical practice, and I was in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. And I worked at this pretty big clinic, and they had private label products. So I didn't know the companies. They just had this big medicinary, and like, these are the products. You can recommend anything, but it's always so much easier for the patient if it's right here. So started to use those more. And a couple of years there, I started, this one works, I don't like this one so much, that type of thing, really kind of getting that product line down and seeing what's working. And then I had one experience with one particular product. I recommended a capsule version of, it was a magnesium. I recommended a capsule, and this patient wanted a powder that they can put in a drink. So they got something different that I didn't recommend, and not something that I typically use, simply because most people like capsules and don't want the powders. So I just didn't use that one. And she called me the next day and she said, what did you give me? I feel amazing. And she was dealing with anxiety, depression, insomnia, kind of like that sort of picture. And she said, I woke up with energy. I feel great. I'm happy. I'm smiling. I feel lighter. And so we went through her list, and that was the one thing was a magnesium. And the product is called Opti Mag Neuro. And I picked that one out. I was like, that's different. And so I started using that with different patients and had a lot of similar results. I started using it personally, and same thing. I've kind of always I've been an athlete my whole life, so having magnesium issues is pretty common.
Is that a glycinate, doctor?
Yeah, so there's a couple different forms. It's a glycinate, a malate, and a magnesium L-threonate combined together.
Woo!
And I've used all of those individually, and then I've used the glycinate malate combination. And they're all fine, but that combination of those three, the threonate,
synergistic.
The threonate is known to cross the blood-brain barrier really quickly, so it kind of gets into the brain. It's called the brain magnesium. So I've used that standalone. It's good. I've used the other ones. They're good. That combination was just kind of magic for people. To this day, it remains my favorite supplement of all time. It's the one that I use probably more than anything else.
Opti Mag Neuro.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So that was when I was like, who the heck is Xymogen? What is Opti Mag Neuro? What's going on? And so I started.
Who was that masked Avenger? Who was that?
Yeah. So I started looking into the private labeled products that I'm using. And all of the ones that I preferred are Xymogen. It would be like, these two products are private labeled slightly different, and I use this one. Turns out this is Xymogen, that's not Xymogen. And everything that I found that worked in my practice was Xymogen. So I started developing a relationship with the company. Like, who are you guys? Like, what's the deal? Why are you so awesome? And I found out all the things that I just told you. They just do it right. And so simultaneously, I also saw countless patients, and we do nutritional testing. We do a lot of stuff. And sometimes it would be like, you need B12. Holy moly, your B12 is so low, you have B12 deficiency symptoms. And they'll say something like, I've been taking B12 for like 9 months. It can't be. And I'm like, try this B12. And better. Everything changes. And that's when I realized I sort of knew it, but I was a little naive to the fact that there's just junk out there. You can get a B12. It's possible there's not even B12 in it. That is a possibility.
Yep.
So
there was an expose, you may or may not remember it, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I can't remember if it was 2020 or 60 Minutes. One of the big news magazine shows did an expose on herbal supplements that were being distributed through CVS, Walgreens, and perhaps Target.
Mm-hmm.
It was all herbal, and they just did an expose and tested them all, and like 80% of them were like sawdust. They just were not, what was on the label was not what was in the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my big awakening it made me paranoid. Like, I'm looking at this stuff, I'm spending $72 for a bottle. Am I just buying sawdust? Like I don't mind spending extra if that's what it takes to know that what's in the bottle. And this is probably a good time for me to let everyone know this is not a sponsorship. Xymogen isn't sponsoring me. I want to bring the best to my listeners. And so for me, I don't mind spending more to know that what's on the label is what's in the bottle, because spending $55 and getting sawdust, or spending $68 and getting great nutraceutical medicine, it's so much worth the $13, whatever the difference. I'll pay for that regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm very much aware of that. That was a while ago. But then there's smaller stories that come out like that regularly. Probably every couple of weeks, every few months, there's some company did a terrible job. They're not doing it right, and someone caught them. It happens all the time. So yeah, that combination of like, okay, I found stuff that really works, and also there are supplements that are terrible. And at the same time, I love clinical practice, but I can only see so many people a day, and I'm like ultra ambitious. Like, I need to cure the whole world. I can't. 8 people a day is not going to do it. I need like 8,000 a day. And so Xymogen,
you were chosen. I let the people know now. You were chosen by your classmates to speak at the graduation. And when you went up to the podium,
how did you know that?
They roared for you. And I said, oh, this guy is beloved by his colleagues, by your contemporaries. And like, your speech was so powerful, very moving. So I want to let the people know, if they want to check that speech out to see what this guy's all about, Dr. James Munro, spelled Munro. And it's right there. I think it's on your website. And
I think it's on my YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, on your YouTube. So we'll give those addresses out in just a little bit. I keep interrupting you. I apologize. I need to just sit on my hands and let the doctor preach. Let you preach your wisdom and keep my mouth shut.
Well, that's pretty much the end of the story. I found out that Xymogen needed some help with just answering clinical questions that came their way. They have a customer service department, and they were getting questions that they couldn't answer. So they brought me in to help there. And then, the company was so great. It's a family-owned company. So the Blackburns own the company. The husband and wife started it. They're the CEO and COO respectively. Wow. And then the 3 children work there, and they're all amazing at their jobs. And more importantly, they're really great, honest, wonderful people. And so I started working with them, kind of a limited capacity. I wasn't doing too much, just helping answer some questions. And I was like, I need to get involved, and kind of like some stars aligned, I suppose. And they were interested in working with me as the medical director. And so I stepped into that role. And
Wow.
officially, I was doing that answering question stuff remotely from Atlanta while still practicing. And then I moved over to Orlando to be at headquarters full time and work with them more exclusively. And I don't regret it at all. They're great. They're just so wonderful to work with. And I just trust the product. And I know that they're providing stuff that people really need in a world where a lot of stuff is, not like we talked about, not what it appears to be. This stuff is real for sure.
Absolutely. Did you maintain your practice at all, or did you go full-time into medical directing?
So moving to Florida, which is an unlicensed state, I'm terrified of practicing here. So I was practicing in Atlanta, and Georgia's also unlicensed, but Georgia, you can kind of practice as a consultant. So I was just kind of like adjunctive care, helping people. Their doctor would give them a diagnosis, and I'd kind of talk them through some potential options that they might want to consider, that type of thing. Moving to Florida, I just cut that off, and now I'm really focusing on changing the licensing laws here in Florida. So hopefully in the next maybe year or two, we see some changes to that so I can practice again.
Wow. Wouldn't that be powerful?
Yeah.
Well, let me know if you need any help in that regard. If you're campaigning and you need me to help you push any material or information out there, I'd be happy to do it.
Will do.
I have a lot of people. I have a lot of friends who are, here in Florida and of like mind and have a little bit of sway in different areas. So maybe we can, help out with that campaign in any way we can. Cause I am missing, I've lived on the West Coast for quite a while, and I miss the selection and the, 10x increase in, medical options that are available to you on the West Coast. We just took it for granted out there that you could just go to a naturopathic doctor. Just West Coast is no slight at all on the East Coast, but West Coast is a little bit ahead of the game, I think, when it comes to, complementary medicine.
I like I said, I really respect all forms of medicine.
Yeah.
Anything that could potentially help someone, I'm all for it. But what I think really needs to happen in Florida, East Coast particularly, is make those choices available to people.
Yes.
You don't have to come see me. You can think naturopaths are total idiots. That's fine. But someone that doesn't think I'm an idiot and wants to come see me, they should be able to if they want to.
Yes, the whole thing, right? America, freedom, freedom to choose, freedom of choice. Let's go to the person who's sitting at home now and is lit up and they're looking up Xymogen. What would be the most important things that they should keep in mind when they're considering supplementation?
Oh, so this kind of goes back to naturopathic philosophy. So I have a couple different analogies, and the first one, it's a little more well-known. It's called the therapeutic order. I think this is so important that people understand this. And this goes back to, I have this disease, what supplement should I take? It's all about the therapeutic order. You can kind of think about maybe like a food pyramid or a ladder. And at the bottom rung, at the base of it is just your basic stuff. Your relationships. Are you happy? Are you doing what you like? Are you eating enough food? Are you drinking water? Are you sleeping? Just these really basic things. And then as you move up, we'll just jump all the way to the top of that. Surgeries, medications. And then in between, you have your things like structural integrity. Are your bones in the right place? Do you have a separated, dislocated shoulder? Those kinds of things. You got to make sure that shoulder's back in its place, or nothing's going to get better and no drug is going to help that. And then the nutraceuticals fall in there. But then just basic nutrition is in there too. Are you eating all of the stuff that you need to eat? And then do you need to supplement with some stuff? And then above that, are there herbs or specific interventions that you need? You just keep walking up that ladder or that therapeutic order. And if you're going to jump into a supplement, you really have to be hitting all of the things below that. So if you're going to take a supplement, or you're going to take a medication, or you're going to have surgery and you don't sleep at night, or you don't drink water, you're really limiting your capacity to heal. It's just not going to happen. So that's something I always make sure to tell people about, is if you're going to take a supplement, that's not the answer. So you have to hit all that stuff beneath, and then that supplement can really help. If you're doing everything right and gosh, you just can't quite get enough magnesium, magnesium's going to help. But if you eat like garbage, you don't sleep, magnesium's not doing anything for you. And my more simple analogy is imagine building a house. Supplements are things like the roofing tiles and the screws and the nails. All of those are really important, and you got to make sure that they're there. If you don't have a foundation, it doesn't matter how great your nail is. It doesn't matter. That house is going to fall apart. So that's the most important thing about considering supplementation is it's even in the word. It's supposed to supplement.
It's in the word. Yeah, it's a supplement.
To supplement what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's just an extra little tool that you can use. It is not itself a solution. And working for a company like Xymogen and designing supplements, sometimes people don't really get that that's my approach. But I'm providing tools. But if you're not building that foundation, those tools aren't going to help you.
Hey everybody, Jordan J. Adams here. If you're ready to take a deeper dive into Nucom, that's Nucalm, Nucom.com. Check it out. Neuroscience technology that used to be exclusively available for the U.S. military, pilots, doctors, and professional athletes. The world's only patented technology, clinically proven to expedite recovery, improve sleep, and sharpen focus without drugs. The world's first and only patented technology, clinically proven to lower stress and improve sleep quality without drugs. It's backed by over 33 years of patented, clinically proven neuroscience. By late August 2023, Nucom will surpass over 1 billion listened to minutes. It's an FDA Class 3 medically device cleared now for you for the treatment of anxiety, depression, and insomnia as well. Nucom was approved by Health Canada. It's approved by the U.S. military and has been used in over 2 million surgical procedures as a replacement for general anesthesia. Nucom has been used by over 56 professional sports teams since 2011. Nucom is used across the U.S. Department of Defense, Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Air Force Special Operations, Border Patrol, FBI, and more. And United Fight Alliance is extremely proud and excited to now bring you a 15% discount off the first month of any Nucom subscription. We'll include a hyperlink to Nucom in the show notes, and for your 15% discount, use UFA. That's UFA, Uniform Foxtrot Alpha. Doctor, what are 5 staples that are hard to get in the diet and should be considered for supplementation?
5 might be tough. I can come up with a couple. So one is magnesium. Magnesium insufficiencies and deficiencies are rampant. Very few people actually consume enough magnesium to keep those levels adequate. So that's a really big one. Symptoms of magnesium deficiency that you might want to look out for, they can be really non-specific. Some of the more specific ones, muscle cramping. If you get those muscle cramps and it just won't let go, it's probably magnesium. Could be some other electrolytes too, but magnesium is the first thing I'd think about there. But frank magnesium deficiency, depression, anxiety, low energy, you just don't feel well. Muscles aren't working properly. Blood pressure can go up. Cardiovascular risk increases. Magnesium is important for so many different things. Building up our energy and our ATP, that's like our cellular currency. That's like the gasoline that gets the body going. And ATP requires magnesium to be stabilized. If you make ATP in your mitochondria and you don't have magnesium to attach to it, it just falls apart. So even if all of your machinery is working properly, which without magnesium probably wouldn't be working properly, but even if it is, and you come up with that end product of ATP without magnesium to stabilize it, it falls apart, which means you don't have energy. Your cells don't have the power that it needs. So that is...
And there are different kinds of magnesium, right? Like the glycinate, the carbonate, and I know there's like maybe 4 or 5 different ones. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it important to get all of those like in one supplement to work synergistically, or is it just as powerful to get like a magnesium glycinate and that'll do all you need?
So it's a little bit interesting because magnesium, it's a rock, right? So just pure magnesium, it's not a good supplement. And even when you consume it in foods, it comes in compounds. Magnesium citrate is really common in a lot of the foods that we eat. And those compounds are much better absorbed, much more tolerable in general. And so the trick is getting that magnesium into the bloodstream. Once it's in there, it's kind of doing its thing. So there is an argument to be made that any kind of magnesium can work, whether it's magnesium citrate, magnesium carbonate, threonate, you name it. Once it gets in there, it will kind of do its thing. But it is attached to that different compound. And that thing that it's attached to can really make it behave quite a bit differently. So magnesium citrate and oxide and carbonate, they're not very well absorbed. So that makes the magnesium stick around in the GI tract a little bit more. It is absorbed, but maybe less so than some of the other forms. So it can potentially cause diarrhea because magnesium hanging out in the GI tract pulls water in from the cells around it through, it's called an osmotic pressure, just pulls that water in, and that can result in diarrhea. And so those forms that are a little bit less absorbed, maybe it's not great for those systemic things, or it's a little bit great for those systemic things, but it's really great if you're trying to combat constipation and trying to get things moving in the GI tract. Then those types of poorly absorbed magnesiums would be a great choice there. And then the other ones, so I mentioned already, magnesium threonate, glycinate, and malate are probably my three favorite, and I love them in a combination. They all kind of do different things, but they are all very similar because the thing that's doing the magic is the magnesium. And so that compound gets it into the bloodstream and then kind of like a magnet pulls it into certain areas of the body. The magnesium L-threonate, that will pull it to the brain and get into the brain. And so if you're dealing with insomnia issues or depression, anxiety, brain injuries, looking to prevent dementia, trying to just really fuel that brain, then that magnesium L-threonate is a great choice there. If you take magnesium glycinate or magnesium citrate, that magnesium will eventually find its way into your brain. It's not like it's locked off and only threonate gets there. It just takes way longer. That threonate molecule will drag that magnesium right into the brain, where the citrate molecule will not do that. And it's just going to float around in the bloodstream and eventually it can find its way into the brain. So the answer to your question is like very obnoxious and annoying. There are definitely better forms of magnesium for particular things. But really, if you can get that magnesium into the bloodstream, you're going to see that magic. So I prefer chelated magnesiums, which a general definition is a magnesium that is attached to an amino acid. And the reason that those are a little bit better is because when you're absorbing it, the body will look at magnesium as a mineral, and minerals go through certain channels to get into the bloodstream. When it's combined with an amino acid like a threonate or a glycinate, the body actually sees that amino acid, and amino acids are much better absorbed in general. In terms of nutrients, amino acids go right into the bloodstream. So that magnesium goes for a ride along with that amino acid. So if you're looking for systemic effects, then generally I look for a chelated magnesium. I think that's really important. And then if you want to get more specific, malate and glycinate, they can be really helpful for like muscles and energy. Threonate can be really helpful for the brain stuff like we talked about, but there's crossover between them, and some are better for some people and others are better for some people. So it really depends on your particular situation. But if you're just looking for magnesium and you don't really know what's going on, a chelated magnesium attached to an amino acid, that's the glycinate, malate, those types. Those are preferred generally.
Does the magnesium that you had mentioned earlier in the show, the Opti Mag Neuro, does that incorporate all of those different elements you talked into, just to sort of, for the people who get overwhelmed with all that information you just gave us? For those people, does the Opti Mag go ahead and do all of that? Is it chelated? Is it have the threonate and the glycinate and all that? Is it synergistic?
Yeah. And I think, as I mentioned, I've tried all of those different forms individually, and the combination, I've never read a research article that has looked at that combination and explained why it works. But my theory is because those three are really well absorbed, they are chelates, all of them those are amino acids. And so they're really well absorbed, which is one positive benefit. But they go different places. So if you just take the magnesium L-threonate, it's going to preferentially go into your brain, and your muscles might not get as much of that magnesium. where if you take the malate, your muscles get a lot of that magnesium, but your brain doesn't get that much. So that Opti Mag Neuro, my theory as to why it works is because it just kind of hits all those areas. If you need magnesium in your brain, you need it in your muscles for sure, and vice versa too. So just doing one that is a little bit more skewed towards one side might not benefit most people. Some people might do amazing with the standalone 3 and 8. But yeah, the reason that I like Opti Mag Neuro is it just kind of hits all of those really key areas that most people are struggling with, especially those people that are looking for magnesium. It's well absorbed. It tastes good. There's also capsules, but it's in the powder. It tastes really nice. But yeah, it's just well absorbed and kind of hits all of those major areas. And that's the 3 and 8, the malate and the glycinate combined in one.
The 3 and 8, the malate and the glycinate. And that's the Opti Mag.
Yeah, this turned into a commercial.
I know. It's, again, it feels like a commercial, but I'll remind everybody, I am not sponsored. I'm getting nothing whatsoever from Xymogen. I am doing this because one of my very close friends, who is a compounding pharmacist here in Tampa, I asked him what he takes, and he said this is what he's been taking for 10 or 15 years. So that's why. And then to hear the story of that it's family owned and that they have good hearts and that they hold themselves to higher standards than the government does. So that's what I'm looking for. Again, it's not a matter of money. I want my brain to work well because I can make all the money in the world when my brain works well. So I don't care what it costs. People say, well, it's a little bit more. Who cares? If my brain's working well, I can buy 10x what I need. So, it's just like, do you believe you can generate the wealth you need if everything's working well? But if the brain goes, man, you can't, then you're in trouble. There's nothing this is that's what, I've got one of my symptoms, which we can talk about later, but is brain fog. And, I've heard about magnesium. I've heard about the importance of magnesium. So please forgive us at home if we've been on magnesium too long here, but boy, it's a fascinating mineral. It's fascinating.
And we just don't get enough of it in our diets.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's one of the big missing supplements that we were talking about. The staples that we had mentioned. Are there any other, that's clearly a must do. Are there any other must do's that are hard to find in the diet?
Probably there's some probably should do's, but the other must do is CoQ10, I think. And that is mostly after the age of 30, because CoQ10, we get it in some foods, we get it in like meats and some things, but mostly our CoQ10 comes from our endogenous, our body makes it. But we slow down that production. Once you hit about 30, that production slows enough to where it's potentially noticeable. And you can measure these levels in various blood tests, so you can actually see where you're at. But generally, at the age of 30, those levels start to decline, and replacing that CoQ10 can be really helpful. CoQ10 is incredibly important in the electron transport chain, which we were talking about ATP earlier, how the body makes energy. CoQ10 is a big part of how that ATP, how that cellular energy is made. And so if you don't have enough CoQ10, the mitochondria, the energy house of the cell can't do what it does. So CoQ10 is much more important than just that, but energy is a really big one. So as energy levels decline, could have something to do with lower CoQ10 levels. And CoQ10, there's some nuances in terms of supplementation there that we can get into. I don't know how nerdy we want to get, but.
Well, I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the people who are at home saying, I'll just get that in my food, I believe that the concentrations are like in organs, right? If you're going to do that, more power to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, okay. That's awesome. And there are some estimates out there that we're not even close to the amount of CoQ10 that we need. We're not even close to getting that in our diet. And mostly we rely on our body's ability to make it. And again, after the age of 30, it starts to really decline.
And what is CoQ10? Is that a fat? What actually is it?
Yeah, well, it's like a fat-derived vitamin. So it's a fat-soluble vitamin.
Fat-soluble vitamin. A long time ago, probably over 10 years ago, I did a show with Dr. Langshan. I don't know if you know Dr. Langshan. he's probably one of the world's leading scientists on coenzyme Q10. That's probably in my YouTube profile for people who are watching this on YouTube. It's also on all the podcast platforms as well. His name's Langshan. I believe it's spelled Langson, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, for people who want to drill down on the importance of CoQ10, that was a show. And it's a nerdy show, big time. The guy went big time medicine on me and dusted me. I was like, all right, I'm just going to keep quiet on this one.
Sounds right up my alley. I'll check it out.
Yeah. Are there any supplements that are a waste or worse yet, counter-indicated?
Ooh. I never really think about it like that because anyone could need anything. So, all right, hear me out. Potentially any supplement could be a total waste. If you're just randomly grabbing stuff, you don't know if you need it or not. So yeah, potentially anything could be wasteful. So I would say there might be something, but off the top of my head, there's nothing that, gosh, no, this will never help anyone because someone will need something. We all have different experiences and different absorption rates. So nothing really jumping out as like, no, that's ridiculous.
You know what that brings up, Dr. Monro? I'm sure that you've seen these new groups coming out who will say, a X vitamin could actually be really counterindicated for you depending on what, your body, what's going on in your body, whereas it could be, mana medicine for this person. How about these? What are your thoughts on these new groups coming up where you can send samples in, whether it's, blood or spit or feces? You send your samples in and you get a kind of like a fingerprint answer of the exact supplementation that you need. Like, this probiotic would be good for you. This one would be a waste. This vitamin will be amazing for you. This one you're already high in. You don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
Those groups are very interesting to me. Mm-hmm. Because what if I'm spending all this money on a vitamin that I'm already high in that I didn't need, whereas I'm way low over here and I didn't know it and I'm not getting that vitamin. So like, one man's poison is another man's mana.
Yeah, very well put. And so those lab tests, there are many. So I'm sure there are some that are not worth your time or money. But I do know of a couple that definitely are worth your time and money. There's so many different methods to testing various things. Well, we shouted out Xymogen, so I'll throw out some other companies. I really like Vibrant America, so they do a lot of different testing, but it's a really nice lab company. I love their micronutrient testing. It looks at red blood cell levels and serum levels of everything, just a ton of different nutrients, and will tell you what you're low in, what you're high in, what you might need. And they can really help guide you in terms of nutritional supplementation, what your body needs at that particular moment. I love that company. They do a really great job, and I've used them many times. And the reason that I can say that they are doing a good job is because I get consistent results. And then when we take action on the results that we're seeing, people's lives change. They get better. It'll say like, oh gosh, your B12 is really low here according to this test. Take B12. And then things start to get better. And then we retest and the B12 is good. So that's how I can judge that that's a good test. And it's not the only good test. There are plenty out there, but I would assume there's probably some really bad ones out there. So you got to make sure that you really kind of vet those companies before you jump into it. But super helpful in general. It's a really great concept that can help a lot of people.
Does Xymogen test?
We don't do any testing currently.
Okay. I have some samples in. I'm waiting to get some results back. I tried Viome.
I think I've heard of that one. I've heard of that one.
Yeah. The founder, I can't remember his name offhand, but he was on a lot of the big podcasts that I like to watch. And I could tell his heart was in the right place, and he really knows the science. So it's called Viome. I'll let you know when I get the results. But it looks pretty comprehensive. I had to give a lot of blood. A lot of the samples was, I think it's, I don't know how many pages, a big multi-page report you get back on. You get your the vitamins that you need that you're low in, you get the probiotics that you need, the enzymes, the minerals. And they also give you your biological age versus your chronological age.
Cool.
Which a lot of people may not know. Maybe you can go into that there's actually, they now can give a very accurate reading of your biological age. You could be actually 32, but you might actually be 49 biologically, or vice versa. Do they do it with like telomere lengths, or how do they figure that out?
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert in that, but telomere length is a really big one. But general, just like cell health and vitality, and looking at the membrane of the cell. So a lot of those tests probably are relying on the telomere length, which is kind of the end of the DNA strand, and the length of that kind of tells you how much life that DNA strand has left. Really fascinating stuff. I'm definitely not an expert in those genetic components, but that is probably a large part of what they're looking at. But then the robustness of some individual cells, I would imagine they're taking a look at that too.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'll if you're interested, I'll send you just so you can see the comprehensive nature of of what they send back. I'm really excited.
Definitely.
It takes about 3 weeks, and I sent them in about 2 weeks ago. So I think I got about another week to go before I get my results back. But I'm excited about it. Supplements for the big four. The big four that is most likely going to get most of us would be cancer, heart disease, I believe diabetes, and then all the different forms of dementia. I think those are those the big four?
Those are pretty big. Yeah. Yeah. I'll agree with that.
Yep. Those would be the big ones. Yep. So, I know I'm asking for a lot of information here, but based on the fact that these are the four things we're all trying to prevent, it's probably be very handy for us to know. What would you say are the most important antioxidants for cancer prevention, or cancer, like increasing your odds of not getting cancer?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that are worth noting there. And again, this goes back to the therapeutic order, and it's not going to start with supplements for sure. When we talk about antioxidants, they're super important, and they're found in a lot of our foods. But before we even get there, we need antioxidants because we are exposed to oxidative stress. And so some oxidative stress is actually really healthy and awesome. Exercise, for example, really causes a lot of oxidative stress. Under normal circumstances, our body can combat that oxidative stress. And if the only oxidative stress you have is from that 4-mile run that you did, you're going to be just fine. But smoking, alcohol, numerous drugs, pollution in the air, all of this stuff causes major oxidative stress. And that oxidation can cause major damage in the body. And there's this balance, right? We can produce a lot of antioxidants in our body. We can consume some. Berries are fantastic sources. But we also need to fuel that process, that cellular process that produces those antioxidants. And the best thing to do that's called the NRF2 pathway, if you're interested in that. We won't get too into the nerdiness stuff there. But that's the pathway that gets triggered, and we produce a lot of antioxidants when that pathway is going. One of the best promoters of that pathway, broccoli, and a lot of the stuff that's in broccoli, sulfurophane, for example.
Dr. Rhonda Patrick does a whole thing on sulfurophane. I don't know if you've seen it. Very comprehensive. She's on Rogan's podcast. And they did like a 2-hour show on broccoli sprouts.
Yes.
That's how powerful, apparently, this anti-cancer property is in broccoli and broccoli sprouts. So I guess the sprouts are like 10x the broccoli.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll go into that in a little bit. I always tell people broccoli is my favorite food of all time, and it has been since, honestly, I was like 10 years old, and I went through a whole phase where I got made fun of for that. And
you're an outlier, man. At 10 years old,
cool about
that broccoli.
Now it's like a little source of pride. But the magic in broccoli is sulforaphane. But the catch is that sulforaphane is a very unstable molecule. It just falls apart. So if you actually have sulforaphane, it does not last very long. Its precursor is called glucoraphanin, and glucoraphanin is very stable. But you need one of two things or both things to turn that glucoraphanin into sulforaphane. One is the bacteria in your GI tract. And there are a lot of really smart, really awesome people trying to figure out which bacteria can cause that conversion to take place. And as far as I know, there might be some info out there, but I don't know about any particular like probiotics, or if we can identify which bacteria in our GI tract can cause that reaction to occur. But at this point, all I know about it is that in the GI tract, some of those bacteria are going to cause that conversion. The other thing is an enzyme that is naturally found in broccoli and a lot of cruciferous vegetables, and that's called myrosinase. So when you take glucoraphanin and you add myrosinase, poof, it turns into sulforaphane. And the bummer here is when you cook broccoli, the glucoraphanin, very stable, that stays, but the myrosinase falls apart. So the ability of that glucoraphanin to turn into sulforaphane really starts to decrease as you cook your broccoli. And that could be boiling, steaming, roasting. It's just any heat really will start to break down that myrosinase, that enzyme. But then on the other side, when you eat raw broccoli, sometimes that can be difficult to digest. So there's kind of like these pros and cons. So there are, you could do supplements and stuff, but just focusing on the food side of things, probably the best way to get a lot of sulforaphane is on the more raw side, or a lightly steamed broccoli, to kind of soften it up a little bit, but you're not going to totally wipe out all of the myrosinase. And also a healthy microbiome will cause that conversion to happen more. And so if you're looking for a supplement for sulforaphane, I don't even know if they exist, but if you find a sulforaphane supplement, just don't waste your time. The instant it's put in the capsule into the bottle, before it even leaves the factory, it's not sulforaphane anymore. Now it's just all of the metabolites of sulforaphane that don't do anything. So I'm not even sure if those actually exist or not.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a real thing, because it doesn't work.
Right.
And so glucoraphanin is another option. And this is, I don't want to turn this into a commercial, but Xymogen created a product where glucoraphanin is combined with the myrosinase in a capsule that is stable. So without going too deep into like the product side of things, if there is a combination of those two, you need to make sure it comes from a reputable company, because just like sulforaphane not being stable, if you combine glucoraphanin with that myrosinase and it's not in a stable environment, or if there's any moisture there, it's going to react, turn into sulforaphane, and then that sulforaphane turns right into those worthless metabolites. And so there are combinations of glucoraphanin and myrosinase out there, and theoretically great, but you have to make sure it is a reputable company. And then there are also just that standalone glucoraphanin, and the conversion is totally variable based on individual microbiome stuff. So supplementation is out there, but what I would say more important than anything is avoiding oxidative stress wherever you can. Not avoiding it entirely. Like I said, exercise is a great way to get some oxidative stress, but cigarette smoke, inhaling exhaust fumes from a car, these things are really, really damaging to us. So avoiding all of those types of things, or at least as much as you can, and eating lightly steamed broccoli often, daily, pretty magical. And then more than that, berries, those types of things. Berries are just like frank antioxidants, where the antioxidant activity of broccoli, it has those direct antioxidant activities, but it prompts the body to make its own antioxidants. That's why broccoli is so cool. So that's where a lot of that anti-cancer properties come from broccoli. So that's one supplement, but honestly, if you do it right, you don't even need that supplement. But that's probably the most important consideration, is that oxidative stress and cancer.
I had, I'm in my 60s, so I was around before cigarettes became pretty much non-existent. And as a kid, and even as a teen, pretty much everybody smoked. I didn't smoke, but both my parents did. And people smoked inside the house. They smoked in our university, in the hallways, they smoked. I was in the Army. Everybody smoked in the barracks. And I always hated it. It always bothered me. It always gave me a sore throat. It always made my lungs hurt. And so I over the last 10 or 15 years, have always looked into powerful antioxidants, especially for the lungs and the throat, to try to be proactive. One of the things I've been doing now for about 5 years, and the reason I'm leading into it is because I have read some literature as of late that there might be a better way to do this, or could even be counterproductive. So I've been nebulizing glutathione.
Yeah.
And inhaling it right into my lungs, getting it all over in my sinuses, getting it in my throat. And I always do it if I feel like a cold coming on, if I feel lethargic or brain foggy. It always seems to do the trick for me. It's 90% of the time, it's wonderful. But I've read a few articles saying that you want to try to generate your own glutathione rather than exogenous glutathione, because of that exact thing you were talking about before, where the body needs the oxidation for rebuilding, for strengthening its own immune system. So there seems to be some almost some push-pull here that's becoming convoluted for me and a little bit confusing. I've always thought that it was good to get exogenous glutathione. Maybe tell us what glutathione is, and have I been a knucklehead for nebulizing it for the last 10 or 15 years?
Well, glutathione is kind of the body's, it's considered the master antioxidant. It's one of the most potent antioxidants that's made in the body, and it smells like rotten eggs. So I'm sure you're pretty familiar with that, all of that, nebulizing it. And it is quite important. Are you doing damage by nebulizing for the last 10 years? I don't think that there's any evidence of that, but relying on that would be problematic. So again, go back to that therapeutic order. Are you smoking cigarettes and not eating broccoli and then just nebulizing glutathione? That's not going to work out for you. But if you're hitting all of those levels, I could be wrong on this. I've never looked at it before, but nebulizing glutathione fairly regularly, what, like maybe every few months or so you're doing it? Or
I only do it, I don't rely on it. I do it more as a preventative measure. You know how you can feel that tickly feeling in the back of your throat, or you get a runny nose, you know a cold is coming. I do it almost as an interception. And I have to say, I'm thinking at least 90% of the time it works. I know I'm about to get a cold. I nebulize the glut, and I'll, spend a half an hour just inhaling the stuff. And then I just am not sick the next day. I'm normal the next day. I said, boy, I just saved myself 4 days of having a cold.
Yeah, I can't imagine that would be harmful, because when we get a sickness like that, especially a respiratory or upper respiratory infection, one of the things that happens, our immune system causes a ton of oxidative stress. So we have all this oxidative reactions, those redox reactions happening in our sinuses, and in some cases all the way down to our lungs, depending on the infection. And the body only has a limited capacity to produce antioxidants. And so in those cases, when suddenly your amount of reactive oxygen species in the body just dramatically increases, which is what the immune system does, that's how we get rid of infections. You start to just pump those reactive oxygen species, and then we need to neutralize them. So yeah, when that level goes up, you need to add that level of antioxidants to help to calm that back down.
Sorry to interrupt, but this goes directly to the crux of this almost conflicting paradox. The body's releasing all the oxidase and oxidants as a kind of a cleaning up, right? Or tuning up the immune system, getting those cells. It's almost like, I know it's probably not the same as autophagy, but isn't it sort of a cleansing process in and of itself? It's burning something, right? It's killing a virus, or it's killing a pathogen. Wouldn't the glutathione
and all the tissue around it too? So there's all that collateral damage that occurs. And so many of our symptoms, which I think this is actually lost on a lot of people, when you get a cold and you're sneezing and you have a lot of mucus, that's usually not the virus doing that. That's your immune system fighting the virus that's doing that. So your body is creating all of that mucus and making you sneeze and cough and all of that. That's not the cold virus that's making you do that. That's your body reacting to the cold virus that's making you do that. And so we are just ripping apart all of those tissues which is necessary. I mean, you're just throwing napalm in this area where this infection is. You get rid of the infection, but you damage some tissue. And so once you're kind of clear of that cold, then you need to repair all of that stuff.
Sounds like Alzheimer's. It sounds like the body's all connected. Wait a minute. We may have discovered something here today. It's all connected. All this specialization is not necessarily helping the matter. Like the way what you just said about, I had never thought of it that way. The collateral damage, the good tissue that's getting wrecked by this immune system reaction is damaging, right? Just like the amyloid plaque is not necessarily the bad guy in the brain. That's the fireman going to put out the fire.
Yeah.
Why are we shooting the fireman when he gets to the scene?
Yeah. It's like we shouldn't need firemen. That's the problem. And that's really the whole deal with inflammation too. Inflammation is also something that's totally demonized, like get rid of inflammation. But that is how we heal. If you break your wrist and you get all that inflammation, it's hot and it's swollen, that is a necessary part of the healing process. So you don't want to just shut it off. If you shut it off, you'll prolong the healing process. And actually there's evidence to suggest, very strong evidence to suggest that taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, your ibuprofens and things like that, it slows the healing process. So if you have a damaged tissue, you sprain your ankle, you whatever, break your foot, and you're just taking NSAIDs to lower that inflammation, you're also stopping the body's ability to resolve that inflammation. And as a result, you're potentially prolonging the recovery period for that too. So we need inflammation. We don't want excessive inflammation, but the way that we deal with it is really important.
Wow. That's fascinating. And, it comes back to that balance, doesn't it? Like, trusting the nature, trusting our human nature, trusting, there's so much innate wisdom in the body. And it's a really fascinating to me, the whole issue of bacteria and genes and all these little guys in us that are living like, I read this interesting thing saying I think that we're just vehicles for the bacteria. The bacteria is just using us, right? There's way more bacteria in us than human genes, right? Right. Totally. Like they're the ones just tolerating us because we're getting them around we're their wheels, we're their car, like we're helping to spread them, like they're going to tolerate us. All right, we'll let you live long. So it's a balance, isn't it? It's balance with virus, with bacteria, with genes, expression, non-expression of the genes. Next big killer, heart disease. I suspect, doctor, that I could have some blockage. I'm in my mid 60s. My dad had heart disease. My mom had minor heart disease. I've been very, very clean diet for 25 or 30 years, but I still suspect at some point I'm going to get a little look-see. But what's your overall thoughts on heart disease, supplementation that might help it? And I'm guessing that this has the same elements, same dynamics that you were talking about with the foundation first, the nutritional foundation. But, what are your overall thoughts on America's number 1 or number 2 killer?
Yeah. So the best supplement for heart disease is exercise for sure. That's the number 1. And really what we're doing is increasing circulation and moving things through the bloodstream, and the body gets better at that. So if you're regularly walking and moving and forcing that body to produce circulation and get that blood flow going, then as a byproduct, the body keeps those blood vessels clean. So that's number 1, super important. Magnesium is hugely important in cardiovascular health. And again, it's something that we typically do not get enough of in the typical American diet. And magnesium has a lot of really cool effects. It helps to relax the blood vessels, which can lower blood pressure. This happens particularly if you don't have enough magnesium. The blood vessels start to tighten up a little bit. And then if you replenish that magnesium, it can relax a little bit. So it's not a cure. Magnesium's not a cure for high blood pressure. But if you have high blood pressure and your magnesium levels are low, magnesium's going to be helpful there too. Exercise is still incredibly important. Even if you find that you don't have enough magnesium, you still have to exercise. And magnesium really has a lot of mechanisms in the cardiovascular system that are really important and helpful. And then something that is, it's becoming like it's a newer conversation. It's not necessarily new science, but there is a part of the body that no one really knows about that is super important. And it's called the endothelial glycocalyx. And it's like a gel lining inside our blood vessels. And so if you look at blood flowing through capillaries and you look at it really closely, you'll see that the red blood cell never actually touches the end, never touches the wall of the endothelium. Doesn't get there. And the reason it doesn't get there is there's this little gel lining, and it's electronegative in nature. And so red blood cells are also electronegative, so they kind of repel each other. So you don't make contact with the capillary or the blood vessel wall ever. And if that glycocalyx starts to break down, and that can happen for so many reasons, we'll get to that in a little bit, but let's say the glycocalyx starts to break down, now those red blood cells can bump up against the inside wall of the blood vessels, and that causes a ton of inflammation, and you start to get plaquing and some really significant issues. And another really kind of awesome thing that the glycocalyx does, so it's this gel lining, it's kind of like these little finger-like hairs that are sticking out almost. And as the blood flows through, it moves those hairs. Kind of imagine seaweed in a river, and it's just like flowing. And as that moves more, it causes this response. The body will feel those hairs going, and in response, it will release nitric oxide to relax the blood vessels, because that's basically telling your blood vessel, things are moving a little bit quickly. We got a little bit too much pressure in here. Let's relax it. And so the glycocalyx, if it's damaged, now you can be causing frank damage to the inside lining of the blood vessels, which is a major, major problem for cardiovascular risk and disease. But then also you're going to kind of limit your body's capacity to reduce the blood pressure and kind of respond to those stressors too. And so the glycocalyx is a body part that not too many people know about, and it's super important. The best supplement to cure the glycocalyx, exercise. That's the number one. That's really what's going to do it. But then there are some other things. Flavonoids are really big, just in general, that category, and that can come from citrus fruits have a lot of flavonoids. So like lemon and bergamot actually is a really cool version. Has a lot of really cool flavonoids in there. I use a combination of diosmin and hesperidin pretty regularly, because those are really well researched to support the integrity of capillaries and microvasculature. And there are various seaweed extracts that can be really helpful. Glucosamine sulfate, and that is something that's commonly used for joint health. And there is a major analogy between the joints and that gel lining. It's kind of really similar synovial fluid in the joints and then inside those blood vessels. So that's kind of where that the glucosamine sulfate can come into play for the joints and the glycocalyx. Let's see. I think that's most of them. Flavonoids are a really big one. So citrus, and then supplemental extracts and things like that, of course, too. But those are big ones.
Do you have a dog in the fight when it comes to nutritional philosophy? There's a lot of different schools of nutrition out there in terms of classic. If you, on a Wednesday, eggs are good for you. On a Saturday, eggs are bad for you. And both of these groups, whether they're sort of keto, paleo, ancestral on one side, or vegan, vegetarianism on the other side, essentially, I'm oversimplifying it, I know, but there are those two essential groups in both of these groups deal directly with heart disease. It's like there's this direct connection. Both are making strong claims for heart disease prevention. Do you have a dog in the fight in either of these two camps? If any of the material on our show is helpful in any way, we are grateful. If any of it resonates with you and you're so moved, please share the show, like or subscribe to the show, or better yet, all three. Your support allows us to continue sharing the wisdom of the world's best doctors, sports psychologists, trainers, nutritionists, coaches, lifestyle experts, and business owners. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you. Now, let's hit it. Hey everybody, Jordan J. Adams here. If you're ready to take a deeper dive into Nucalm, that's Nucalm, Nucalm.com. Check it out. Neuroscience technology that used to be exclusively available for the U.S. military, pilots, doctors, and professional athletes. The world's only patented technology, clinically proven to expedite recovery, improve sleep, and sharpen focus without drugs. The world's first and only patented technology, clinically proven to lower stress and improve sleep quality without drugs. It's backed by over 33 years of patented, clinically proven neuroscience. By late August 2023, Nucalm will surpass over 1 billion listened to minutes. It's an FDA Class 3 medically device cleared now for you for the treatment of anxiety, depression, and insomnia as well. Nucalm was approved by Health Canada. It's approved by the U.S. military and has been used in over 2 million surgical procedures as a replacement for general anesthesia. Nucalm has been used by over 56 professional sports teams since 2011. Nucalm is used across the U.S. Department of Defense, Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Air Force Special Operations, Border Patrol, FBI, and more. And United Fight Alliance is extremely proud and excited to now bring you a 15% discount off the first month of any Nucalm subscription. We'll include a hyperlink to Nucalm in the show notes, and for your 15% discount, use UFA. That's UFA, Uniform Foxtrot Alpha.
I have a dog in an entirely different fight. I think we have a very good handle on the nutrients that the body needs and amounts of the nutrients. We have a pretty good handle on that. How we get those nutrients, we do not have a handle on it. And the reason that people are so passionate, I'm theorizing. I'm putting words in their mouth. But I would assume the reason that people are so passionate is because they found something that works for themselves and a lot of the people around them. But standing back and kind of watching all of this, you could pick out any one diet and I can point to someone where that diet does not work for them. All of them. That doesn't mean that the diet is bad. Even if it's great for 98% of people, which I don't think that diet even exists, there's still 2% of people that aren't going to do well on it. So I have a dog in the fight in that I'm really against this is the diet for everyone. I'm really against that. There's no evidence to suggest that. There's a lot of evidence that this diet is great for a lot of people. Keto is awesome. I've definitely met people that they went on keto and just fell apart. Everything was terrible and they were doing it right. They were eating a very healthy, clean version of keto. It's not like they were, you could do bad keto for sure. But I've seen it. The carnivore diet, same thing. It can save a life and then someone can really not do well on it. So it's hard to phrase it. I'm not against any of those diets, but I probably will never say that's the diet. I'm really up for trying anything. I find a lot of people just sort of gravitate towards something. And my approach is, are you getting the nutrients that we know you need? And if you are, then try this diet. And if it doesn't work, then we'll go this diet. We can try carnivore. And if that doesn't work, then go all vegetarian. I don't think that there's one approach. I think they can all really work. So I'm always very respectful and receptive to this is the diet, but I'm also like, I know that's not going to work for everybody. I just know it. I've never seen something that works across the board. So I feel really passionate that we should I'm about to retract it. I'm very glad that there's like people that carnivore is the only way and that's all they do. And I'm really glad there's vegetarians and I'm really glad there's just keto. This is the way to do it. And then I'm glad there's people like me, like, let's try to figure out which one is good for you. because the people that are really diving into those diets, they're doing great work. They're helping a lot of people, and they're really figuring out a lot of really cool things that are going to help a lot of people. And so I just kind of sit back and learn from all of those folks, and then just apply it to whoever I think it would be receptive to it.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like there's a lot of mad scientists out there, and they become their own test studies. Like these people who are very firm and voracious on their particular diet. I did a series not too long ago called MDs who happen to be carnivores, and I interviewed 3 or 4 world-class MDs who happen to be carnivores, and they were all extremely convinced and very firm in their positioning. And because of that, like you say, they do these deep dives. Like we have MDs who have been carnivore for 10 years. And the great part about it is because they're MDs, they're very articulate in translating and describing all of their benefits. And they go into deep detail on their blood work, their panels. And so for someone like you who can read that, like you guys speak the same language, like you reading all of their blood panels and everything, that's must be incredibly informative and enriching for you. The same thing with the vegetarians, that show that came out about 3 years ago on Netflix called Game Changers. And it was all these athletes who were vegetarians, and they showed their blood work, and and they had they made a lot of great points as well. And I love how you just said for each person, it's different, because that really answers the confusion that we all have. Because one man's poison is another man's mana. And that's why the testing that we were talking about earlier, whether you do it with Vibrant America or Viome or any of the other testing companies that you approve of, getting your probiotics and your enzymes and your minerals and your vitamins right based on what you need, based on what you're deficient in, seems to be so much more effective and productive than just hoping and just, shotgun approach. Well, if I just take a lot of these, maybe it'll help.
Yeah. And it's not the approach. that rarely works. But yeah, I mean, I kind of work, I don't know if it's working backwards, but if I'm working with someone and they're feeling awesome, all of their blood work is great, and they've been keto for 25 years, keep going. That's amazing. But then at the same token, keto for 25 years, their hair's falling out, they're nutritionally deficient in a bunch of things. Let's not keto anymore. Let's try something different. So it's just kind of, I love that there are those really passionate folks out there. Awesome. And I've tried keto. I've tried all of this stuff personally. I actually tend towards more vegetarian. I eat meat, but I do much better when I'm mostly vegetarian and with a little bit of meat. And I've tried them all. And so that fine
works for you.
I'm kind of like middle of the road, I suppose, leaning towards vegetarian a little bit, but I definitely have meat daily. So I'm not a vegetarian by any means, but that's kind of what's worked for me. And I've been an athlete. I've experimented both professionally in the medical field and then also as an athlete. Like how am I performing when I'm eating this certain way? And mostly vegetarian with some meats. That I do best. My running times are the best. My cardio is better. All of that kind of stuff.
Interesting. I tried to keto adapt 3 or 4 times because I wanted to test for brain improvement, create more endogenous ketones and see how my brain performed, because that's my big complaint is brain fog. And I tried to keto adapt 3 or 4 times. And like you had mentioned falling apart. That's a good definition of what happened to me when I tried to keto adapt. I fell apart. I thought my brain fog was bad eating general food. When I tried to go keto, I couldn't tell you my last name. It was the brain fog had gotten so bad, the diarrhea, and there was there's something I guess that gets released in the intestines when you go all meat and all fat that I can't remember the word. It might pop in
TMAO. Probably.
Is that what gets released? It's see, this is the brain. When I eat just fat with a little bit of protein, I get really bad diarrhea. I'm not sure what's going on there, but that's part of the falling apart. And then frankly, weight loss. Like you said, you perform better in the gym with plenty of vegetables, and I'm guessing maybe some slow carbs too. I noticed that too. My performance in the gym, when I got some glycogen and I've got, some sugar in the liver and some sugar in the muscles, I'm a monster. Like my strength is through the freaking roof. Like I feel so damn good. And when I try to work out on keto, I feel like a thin, drawn out, dehydrated mess. I can't, God bless my keto friends who can do it. I can't even adapt. I can't even get over to it. I can't get my ketones up in my urine. Like my body won't let me do it. It's like, nope. Eat a potato or I'm going to punish you.
And that's where like maybe a keto expert would be able to look at your diet and look at things and be like, well, have you tried this? And like make these little nuanced changes and maybe they could make it work for you, which again, that's why I'm so thankful for those folks, because that really could happen. Maybe there's just some fundamental, we'll call it a mistake, obviously not a mistake, but some fundamental thing that you're doing that's not working for you, that someone that's really deep into that philosophy might be able to pick up on. My philosophy would be like, forget keto. Let's try something else.
Right. There are three world-class keto guys here in Tampa. Dr. Dom D'Agostino, he runs one of the divisions at USF. And he literally, the top people, whenever they refer to any kind of work or any kind of research in keto, will refer to Dom. He's kind of the godfather. And then there's two guys here, and they're in the performance space. They work with the Buccaneers, the Lightning, at a place called Tampa Bay Applied Sciences, I believe the name of it. And forgive me, I can't remember their names offhand, but they're two guys. I'll have to reach out to those guys as well. Dr. Ryan and Dr. Joseph. I'm embarrassed that I can't remember the names, but again, this is the brain issues I'm talking about. I have no recall. So yeah, that's one of my issues. All right. So that's heart disease. We looked at cancer. We looked at heart disease. Big killer number 3, diabetes. Getting that sugar out of the blood and into the muscle. This is a big issue for me, and I'm sure for a lot of other people. Pre-diabetes, and just metabolic dysregulation, fat around, visceral fat around the organs. But that's not number 3. It might be number 2 at this point.
So
am I correct in saying that?
The latest stats that I'm aware of is a little over 1/3 of Americans are in the pre-diabetic range.
Woo!
That is
Woo!
millions. That is a huge amount of people. And so this is a big problem. The standard American diet is definitely contributing to it. Just sort of our food culture is definitely playing a role. The best type 2 diabetes supplement that is in existence, you may have heard of it. It's called exercise. But
I'm giving you all these opportunities to promote Xymogen. I keep giving you these slow balls right over the plate, like these big softballs right over the plate. And God bless you. You are so clean and so like you go right to exercise. Like it's all right. I'm not giving
something that could be really life altering. So as we become resistant to our insulin, so insulin is the molecule that takes sugar from the bloodstream and like shoves it into the cells that need it. And once we start having big blood sugar spikes, there's a lot of sugar in the blood. So the body starts to respond by making a lot of insulin. But then those insulin receptors, they start to get numb to that amount of insulin and our body stops responding to the insulin. So in response to that, we create more insulin. So this is the process called insulin resistance. Like that insulin's just not doing what it's supposed to do. When you're very insulin sensitive, that one insulin molecule grabs an armful of sugar and shucks it into the cell that needs it. When you're insulin resistant, it'll like maybe grab one, or you need 2 insulin molecules to grab a little bit of sugar and put it in there. And so what we can do is, we have to lower the blood sugar levels. And this is specifically type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, sometimes there's confusion. Type 1 diabetes is something kind of completely different. it's definitely related, and you want to be insulin sensitive in type 1, but it's just a different situation. So type 2 diabetes, one of the first things that will happen before you're diabetic, as just the process is starting, we eat a meal and the blood sugar spikes and then it tanks. And it's during that spike that we start to develop that insulin resistance. And a way to combat that is exercise. And we're not talking about like running a marathon or doing a CrossFit exercise. It's like eating breakfast, and then a few minutes after eating breakfast,
boom,
take a 15-minute walk,
right,
go around the block a couple times. That's it.
Suck it up.
If you walk for 15 minutes after each meal, probably that number, that figure, 1/3, that would probably drop. That would probably cut in half right away, I would assume, just by walking after meals. And then, you know, if you actually start getting into physical activity and training and stuff, it'll change things even more. But we're not talking about like going for a sprint or running a marathon. Walk around the block a couple times after a meal, because you'll blunt that big blood sugar spike that happens. And that is the big problem, because after it spikes, then it tanks. And as it tanks, your energy levels drop. You feel like garbage. And when you feel like garbage, you're less inclined to move and do the things that you need to. So it just kind of perpetuates this cycle.
And you're also more inclined to get some sugar to get that blood sugar back up and try to feel good again. And it's a hamster wheel.
Because you're right. And that will prompt cravings too. That dip in blood sugar, your body will be like, I need a donut right now. And it's not like, gosh, a donut would be good. It's more like your survival instincts start to jump in and say like, I need a donut to survive. Something really wrong is happening. And so
it's irresistible. It's like you think you have the willpower. No, when you're in that state, you're doing something to change it.
Yeah, it's not willpower. You're trying to outwill your body's desire to survive, and that's not going to work. Your biology is designed to survive.
Yeah, and well said.
When those blood sugars levels drop, your body doesn't know that they were just way too high. It's not like, oh, we should be balanced about this. It just recognizes things are too low, and it's this biological need to have sugar. And so I always have a big conversation with people struggling with blood sugar and those cravings, because you be easy on yourself. You're really fighting a very, very difficult battle. So before you try to just cold turkey cut off sugar, get up and walk. Start doing that. That's going to start to make the cravings a little bit better. There's definitely going to be some battles that you're going to have to fight, but you just have to sort of know that the battle that you're fighting, you shouldn't really win. Right. You need to stack the deck in your favor, because if you're going to have low blood sugar after a spike and ask yourself to not crave a sugary food or a high carb food, you're going to lose that one every time. So you sort of have to be prepared for that one.
I love that, Doctor. I love how you're saying, be compassionate to yourself, because it's an unwinnable battle. We have to give ourselves the tools. We got to stack everything in our favor. Like the minerals, man, I noticed that the more minerals I do, and we talked about that a lot in this show, but the more minerals I do, it lessens my cravings. And so it's a win-win-win-win-win. You're talking about all those different, forms of magnesium. It's not only is it good for your brain, not only is it good for your heart, not only is it good for your muscles, but it actually helps to reduce the cravings for sugar. It's shocking to me when I can self-test. We're talking about how we all kind of self-test and then share our findings with each other. I can self-test. I have self-tested. When I forget to take my minerals and when I'm lax in it, my sugar cravings go up and I start eating junk food again. When I don't eat fish, I notice in the morning, my thing is salmon and eggs. And when I don't do that, I start getting on that hamster wheel again. I can set my watch by it. Everything you've said, I've tested, and it's accurate. Everything you've said, I've tested. It's real. It's real. The cravings are real and they're unbeatable. That's why I need to hack the system and set things up in my favor, so that, they say, get all the junk food out of your kitchen. Well, it's hard when you have two little kids who are,
yeah.
I have a boy and a girl, and, I'll tell you, the biggest scam was children's menus. What a scam. What a scam that the restaurant industry has, right? Like, why is it that kids are fried chicken, French fries, mac and cheese, and mine is fish and vegetables? Why would those menus be different? You telling me that fish and vegetables aren't good for my kids? Is that why there's a children's menu?
Yeah.
What a scam.
Oh yeah. Don't even get me started. Yeah.
I know you have 2 kids as well.
Yeah. I have a 3.5-year-old. So we're kind of getting into that phase, but she's eating nothing but like vegetables and clean, lean meats since she was a kid.
Wow. So you're not playing the game.
She's pretty good at it. But we can get into that philosophy. But with
was
her
the first thing that she ate, tell me what the first thing that you gave her.
I think avocado.
Besides breast milk, but
first food was avocado.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was the first.
I have a story. You're going to dig this. I used to work at Disney, not too far from you.
Yeah.
I was doing a show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, at MGM, and had a house in Kissimmee. My wife and I were dating at the time. She was down in, she worked for Wells Fargo in West Palm Beach. So she would come up the turnpike and we would do the Disney thing, of course, because I worked there and we didn't have to wait in line. We didn't have to pay to get in. So anyway, when we had Haley, our firstborn, she was on good food, good everything. But, it's a running joke in the family. You know, the Mickey Mouse head, it's a chocolate Mickey Mouse head. Have you seen it?
Mm-hmm.
It's chocolate covered vanilla ice cream shaped in a Mickey Mouse head. And Corrine, my wife, had gotten one and she's eating it. And Haley's going, she was looking at that thing like, bite. I want to bite. She's a baby. Go up, bite. She's going. So Corrine gives her a bite and I was shooting it on the phone. I shot a video of it. Her pupils dilated, James. Her pupils dilated when she took that first bite of sugar, chocolate, and vanilla ice cream. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, we've made the biggest mistake ever giving her this taste of sugar. Like, it was almost like, the first heroin that someone does, you know what I mean? And she's just as addicted to sugar as Corrine and I am. And we're like, why did we do that? Why did we give her that first bite? Not that she could have avoided it later in school and stuff,
With my daughter, time will tell if this works or not. But I think a big problem in society really is our relationship to food. So I'm incredibly worried about making her afraid of sugar or looking down on sugar. And so what we always say, if she wants something, we say like, okay, that's great. You can have this cake. We're only going to give you a little bit because it's very unhealthy. It's not good for you, but it tastes really good. So sometimes we just want to have things that taste good, but we have to make sure that we mostly eat things that are good and healthy for our body. And I think, like I said, time will tell if this works, but I think the relationship that people have with food, like if you suddenly make sugar this forbidden thing, that's going to be a huge problem. And also, if you make it something that's just around and fine, no problem. So it's just kind of like, these are healthy things. These are not healthy things. You can have whatever you want, just a good balance. And so I think really focusing, and this is not just kids too. I mean, I work with a lot of patients in the same respect, in that, like, how you communicate with food and like, it's how we show love for one another. Like it's really in our society in so many different ways. And so you can't just abandon that upbringing. Like, how do you relate to food? Then we kind of work from there. It goes back to the sugar cravings things. There's some things you're not going to get around. You're not going to go like never have sugar again when your family has these get-togethers and there's tons of sugar. Like, you need to address that gathering and figure out, like, how are you going to interact with your family the way that you normally do with this new diet that you have. And sometimes it's, eat sugar, but make sure you walk afterwards, that type of thing. I think just the relationship that we develop with food throughout our lives, not just in childhood, is really important and really informs the way that we eat throughout our lives.
I want to revisit the 3 bigs before we get out of this particular segment. The 3 bigs, just for people who have been paying attention or didn't quite get the notes: Opti Mag, for all the synergistic chelated magnesiums, magnesium supplement, coenzyme Q10, and nitric oxide and flavonoids are kind of the big four so far that I have takeaways as real pivotal. Like if you're looking for best bang for your buck for your health, these are kind of the big four so far. Is that accurate to say, doctor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Flavonoids and magnesium fits in the heart stuff too. So kind of the same deal.
Now
there.
the magnesium is I'm looking at that magnesium. I think you had actually said at the very beginning of the show, I said, what's the biggest one? I think you said that's your biggest one is magnesium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It just is magic in so many different areas in the body.
Yeah, it does a lot, and we typically don't have enough.
So that's your real.
And then I didn't mention it for diabetes, but berberine is really cool.
Oh,
berberine for blood sugar issues and
apple cider vinegar as well. Same type of dynamic, right? Sucks up the sugar.
Well, no, berberine has many different actions, but yeah, apple cider vinegar is very good, but the mechanisms are quite different than berberine.
Okay.
Berberine gets into the body and kind of it increases our metabolism and helps us to utilize the sugar and mobilizes things in our cells. So like the body says, it's almost like mimicking exercise in a way. It kind of tricks the cells into thinking that it's in a low energy state. And so it pulls that sugar into the cell and kind of burns through things and starts like kind of revving up the metabolism. So that's berberine. That's a really good one. That's probably one of my favorites for blood.
And no counterindications, no reliance, no you know how the body can get used to certain things and it doesn't work as much anymore. Is it always powerful, always efficacious?
Yeah, I mean it's something that people do use long term.
I
always say if you need to use it long term, you're missing something else. Going back to that therapeutic order, you're probably not doing the other things that you need to do. But as far as I know, it doesn't start losing efficacy like that.
Are there any counterindications for the kind of the blood sponges, for lack of a better word, because I don't have the vocabulary you have? I'll call it a blood sponge, which would be a metformin, a berberine, apple cider vinegar. These are all the things really good to take if you're pre-diabetic. Are there any counterindications in the fitness space? If I'm looking to maintain or increase my muscle mass as a big anti-ager, because we know that's another sugar sponge. I'm always looking to increase my muscle, especially being in my mid 60s now. Is the metformin or the berberine or the apple cider vinegar going to hurt me in any ways in that regard? Because I do want some, again, we're back to those weird paradoxes. I do want some insulin, right? To build muscle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Back to paradox.
Yep. You definitely, it's a balance. You can't have too much. You can't have too little insulin. So, well, this is interesting because berberine and metformin, the mechanisms are very, very similar between the two. So it's kind of like the natural versus the pharmaceutical option, but they're quite similar. So we'll kind of put them in the same boat. But if you are trying to build muscle and you're taking one of those, it could be a disservice depending on your blood sugar levels. But basically, berberine is going to be stealing some of that energy that your body would be using to utilize to build the muscle and things like that. Because really, I mean, if you're really trying to bulk up, then prior to that weightlifting session, you need carbs, right? You kind of like carb load a little bit before that, get the sugar in the muscles and go. And so I don't know that I would call it a contraindication necessarily.
Okay.
But if you are doing that, the berberine is probably less necessary. If you're just starting your workout journey, then follow your doctor's advice, honestly, is really what I would say there. But yeah, if you're like a hardcore lifter and you've been doing for a long time, I would say in most cases, you probably shouldn't jump on berberine. I don't think that would be very beneficial. I don't know, quite individual. It depends on your blood sugar levels and your overall health and your diet and all that stuff. But there is reason to believe that it might not be helpful in that circumstance.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here. Our last killer number 4 that we'll get back with after this break will be Alzheimer's and all the dementias. We'll talk about nootropics. We'll talk about what Dr. Monro supplements with himself. It's kind of like, if you want to skip kind of like all trying to figure it out yourself, see what he supplements with. We'll visit whole scripts. We'll visit HDL, LDL issues. Of course, omega-3, I know, is another magic that we haven't gotten into yet. And so much more to get to. Mushrooms, so many different fun areas to explore with the very generous Dr. James Monro when we come back. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
All right. For those of you who are watching us on the YouTube channel, you might wonder why our shirts mysteriously and magically changed. That's because we're picking up on a different day. Yes. Dr. Monro gets quite busy, and so we had to bust out of there and pick up on another day. But I just wanted to remind everybody, we are with Whole Scripts Director of Clinical Services and Xymogen Clinical Director, Dr. James Monro, having a really good conversation. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Monro.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. It's been so lovely talking to you.
It really has been. And I just love talking about, vitamins, minerals, supplements, enzymes, proteins, and Xymogen has that unique market proposition where it's third-party independent tested. And what that essentially means is that you guys give over your offices and your materials and your ingredients to a third-party independent testing organization to confirm what's in the bottle. What you're saying is in the bottle is in the bottle. Is that how that works?
Well, there's a couple steps, but it's a certification. So we use NSF certification. So yeah, they kind of come in. We do some testing is done right in-house. We do have a lab right here in the office. And then some of it is sent out, just depending on the complexity of the lab. But all of those laboratory methods, whether they're in-house or sent out, they're validated and certified by various certification bodies. So we're using real test methods regardless of where they're going. But yeah, everything gets tested. The raw materials that come in are tested before they get to us. And then once they're here, and then we test at a couple times throughout the manufacturing process. And then, of course, the final products get tested as well.
So important, because I know that's, comes into my mind often when I'm in a store and buying vitamins and minerals and supplements, which can be expensive. And I'm wondering, is what they're saying in there? Because there's really, for most supplement manufacturers, there's not stringent. It's not like a pharmaceutical that has to go through all these hoops. And so it's great that you guys, that's self-administered, right? Like you had them do that to you. That's self-inflicted. That's good. It shows that you're confident about what you're putting together.
Yeah, it's because it's not very policed. The industry in general is not very policed by the FDA. And so we know that we're doing it right. So yeah, okay, whoever, come on in, inspect us and check it out. We'll let you know that we are doing it right.
All right, let's drill down on some of the vitamins, minerals, and supplements that are particularly popular these days. And you can maybe tell us what they are and what their action is and whether you recommend them or not. So the first one that comes to mind, because a lot of people are dealing with or inflammation and brain fog and heart disease. We've been hearing a lot now that omega-3 DHA-EPA is particularly effective at addressing those issues.
Yeah, so it's a really complex topic, but we generally will break it down. If I get too nerdy, just kind of reel me back. We have omega-6 fatty acids and omega-3 fatty acids. Both of these are normal and natural, and we need both of them. Omega-6 fatty acids tend towards that inflammatory pathway. So they create some of those compounds that increase inflammation. That's super important. We need that. And then on the other side, the omega-3s tend to go towards that anti-inflammatory pathway, and they're broken down into different molecules that signal the body to stop the inflammatory process. It's working on that resolution phase of inflammation. Both of those, omega-6s sound bad, but inflammation is incredibly important. It's that balance between the two. Both of those fatty acids, those are big categories. So there's multiple different fatty acids that fall under those omega-6, omega-3 categories. They're in our normal diet. But the thing is, different studies are showing different things, but we'll just the standard American diet is about a ratio of about 20-1, omega-6 to omega-3. That is bad.
Wow.
What we're seeing is like the worst ratio that's still good for you is like 4-1. But even closer to 1-1 is probably more optimal for human health. But 4-1 is good. You'll be all right if you have a 4-1 ratio there. But when we're consuming 20-1, when we start thinking about chronic inflammation, it starts to become pretty clear why that's the case. We're just fueling the body with the inflammatory components, and we're not giving any of those anti-inflammatory components. So you need both of them. So from that perspective, omega-3 supplements are super important. And you asked if I recommend them, and very often I do, because I'm in America, and so the standard American diet is pretty common, and not a lot of people get a good amount of omega-3 fatty acids. The best sources are fatty fish, like salmon is a really classic one. And then grass-fed beef tends to have more omega-3s than the more conventional, like the not so great beef will have a higher omega-6 content, be a little bit more inflammatory. But generally speaking, we don't have enough omega-3s. And it is more than just that anti-inflammatory component. All of our cell walls are built by these different fatty acids, omega-6s, omega-3s. And if you have more omega-6s than omega-3s, which is super common, then as these cells start to break down, then they're triggering that inflammatory process, as opposed to having a lot of omega-3 fatty acids. When these cells break down, and that's a normal process, we break things down, you're just kind of putting either inflammatory or anti-inflammatory components into the bloodstream during the normal turnover. This increases during injury or workouts where you're creating micro tears of your musculature and things like that are breaking more cells. And so we're really kind of setting ourselves up for better recovery with better omega-3 or better omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. We're just giving ourselves a better chance. So that was a super brief overview, but do I recommend them? I very much do. I take omega-3s daily because I don't eat a ton of fish, because there are some concerns with fish and mercury toxicity and the cleanliness of fish, and there's a lot of issues there. So we're like balancing all these different things. So I do take not a ton of omega-3 fatty acids every day, but I'll take an omega-3 soft gel pretty much every single day, with few exceptions, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you mind giving us a top 5 ailments that omega-3s would be indicated for?
Well, the classic one is cardiovascular health.
Yeah.
And that is super important. And EPA specifically, that's eicosapentaenoic acid. That's one of those omega-3 fatty acids. That one is really specifically shown to decrease triglyceride levels, which is a major concern for a lot of folks, but kind of balancing the cholesterol profile as well. You can increase particle size of LDL, and LDL is known as the bad cholesterol, but small, dense LDL is even worse, and bigger, fluffier LDL is better. So a good omega-3 profile can increase that LDL particle size, so generally speaking, heart, cardiovascular health, brain is really important, and cell health as well. But brain is important because we think about the cell walls breaking and potentially causing inflammation or promoting anti-inflammatory pathways. And there's not a lot of space in the brain. So even little bits amount of inflammation in the brain can cause some significant damage. So making sure to lower that risk for inflammation in the brain. You can never eliminate the risk entirely, but enough omega-3 fatty acids make it a better environment for the brain to live. And
thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I'm glad you made that distinction and talked about the importance and how small the area is inside the brain. You got one little inflammatory particle or protein that crosses the blood-brain barrier, or that inflammation. And I guess that the brain is so soft and spongy and sensitive that it's so damaging.
Mm-hmm.
People, like it's really like we're all in a fight to save our lives. We don't realize that. We get up and we just sort of get up and have an average day, but we don't think about what a gift this brain is. And like, it's doing everything. The brain's doing everything.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is start getting some brain fog or some food coma to start realizing how much you use your brain. Because when you become incapacitated, now you can't, it becomes one of those slippery slopes, and it becomes like a negative loop that completes itself. You start making less money because you have more brain fog. So you have less resources to buy nutritious food. And so you're just like, it's a race. Look at it as a race. Like you're in a race for your brain to save your brain, or for your brain to save your heart, and just to take some pills, with some orange, well, not orange juice, you're going to raise your blood sugar. Take some pills with some green tea in the morning. And, does Xymogen have omega-3s, DHA, EPA?
Yeah, we have a couple different forms. And so I'll get nerdy again. I'll keep it brief. There's a couple different forms. There's ethyl esters, which are typically known as the least absorbed. There's nothing really wrong with them. It's not like it's a bad form of fish oils. They're just kind of hard to absorb and digest. And then there are triglyceride oils, which are quite a bit better. They're better tolerated, better absorbed. And Xymogen is actually carrying what's called a monoacylglyceride or a monoglyceride oil, which is something of a pre-digested oil. It's kind of the digestive pathway that ethyl esters and triglycerides go through. They need to connect to bile salts and break down, and then they're put into their free fatty acid forms or their monoacylglyceride forms, and those are taken up into the bloodstream. And so the form of fish oil that we're using at Xymogen, it's branded as Monopure. That is a monoacylglyceride. It's kind of like a pre-digested, so it's mixed with enzymes in however they do it and stir it in their little cauldron.
Which is brew.
It's partially broken down, and so it's very readily absorbed. So folks that have a difficult time absorbing fats, and those are people with like gallbladder issues and some various other things, they'll get quite a bit better absorption. And then just in general, there have been a couple pharmacokinetic studies comparing ethyl esters versus monoglyceride fish oils, and the monoglyceride is about 3 times as well absorbed. So you can end up taking a lower dose of that better absorbed form, and it's about twice as absorbed as the triglyceride oil. So kind of if you go ethyl ester, those doses tend to be really high, and it's mostly because you're not getting it into your bloodstream. And then triglycerides, the necessary doses drop a little bit, and then with the monoglycerides, it drops a little bit more. So you can take, the real benefit is you can just take less capsules, less smaller capsules, and get that same amount in the bloodstream.
That is an issue. I notice I'm taking an amino acid combination that's helping to increase my nitric oxide, but they're horse pills, and I've ended up having to blend them in my Vitamix. It's nasty taste, but it doesn't matter.
Terrible.
I can't swallow the pill anymore. It hurts my throat too much.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely horrible. And I take it with the vitamin B that I can't swallow because the pill's too big. And it's nasty. And yet I can't really put sweet stuff in there because I'm on, a low glycemic. And so I just tough it out, and I come back to try to be comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you can do in that situation, really. But the EPAs, I notice, they're in nice gel caps. They're easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
right
soft gels are pretty common for kind of those fat derived vitamins or the fat soluble vitamins. You'll see a lot more soft gels there. Typically, most people can swallow capsules and soft gels pretty well. Tablets start to get a little bit more difficult, and especially when they start getting bigger, they can be pretty tough to swallow.
Yeah, they hurt. While we're in the oil family, there's another category that's been big, especially with the recent C issue we had in 2020, and that's D3, which that's one of those ones that has just become like a hero, like right up there with glutathione and magnesium in terms of just put it in your diet. Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's some controversy there. Just like the testing, looking at your serum vitamin D levels, how accurate is that? Honestly, it's questionable. And it's because we're testing something that is sort of in the middle. Vitamin D goes through this big pathway in the body, and we're like testing right here. So does that really tell us if we're high or low in clinical practice? And a lot of research has come out showing that it's definitely the best we have, and it's definitely helpful. hopefully someone invents something cool that is a better representation of vitamin D levels. But then also the actual levels themselves, some controversy there. Under 20, and this, I always mess this up. I think it's nanograms per milliliter. But that's the pretty common American units that we use. But under 20 is recognized as either an insufficiency or deficiency. And then under 30 is often recognized as an insufficiency. In my own clinical practice, I shoot for between about 50 and 70 for most people. And that's controversial. I'm open to arguments on that one, but typically I see people that they do the best in that range. I've seen people that have 30, so their test comes back normal. It's not in the red, everything's great. And they have all of those vitamin D deficiency symptoms like brain fog and just low energy, depression. A lot of things can happen. Aches and pains, those types of things. And so I've seen people at 30 that have a lot of those symptoms, and then they get up to 50, 60, and they feel great. So when it comes to that standard lab test, everything was great from the get-go. We brought them up to those optimal levels that I found. I didn't make up that optimal level. I learned that from somewhere. So that's a pretty common range that people use, but there are varying opinions on that. But yeah, vitamin D is so incredibly important that you have adequate amounts. And what is the adequate amount? Questionable. But if you tell me all of your symptoms and you tell me your vitamin D level, we can make a good guess as to whether or not some additional vitamin D might be helpful for you.
And forgive me, did you say that there was a level that could be too much, or is that, because I know it's probably oil soluble, and the water solubles you can be over and that's not a problem, but is there ever a counterindication for too much D3?
Totally. Yeah. I'm actually glad you asked that. I probably should have mentioned it. But yeah, fat soluble vitamins in general, they're not all like this. Vitamin K actually doesn't really fall into this category, even though it's still fat soluble, but they're harder to get out of the body. They stick in there much better. So vitamin D sticks around for a long time. If you have really great levels or high levels and you don't take any vitamin D and you stay in the dark, it's going to take a month, 2 months, depending on your situation, to really see significant declines in those numbers. It sticks around for a long time. So when it comes to lab testing, I don't like above 100. I draw the line there. That's kind of my hard stop. Like we need to slow things down. There's some controversy there as well, but I don't go over 100. I don't like seeing that. You can see potential calcium issues, calcification of the blood vessels that could potentially even lead to heart issues and cardiovascular issues. So there are some, it mostly has to do with calcium and hypercalcemia when you get to those really high levels of vitamin D. But I'm glad you asked, because there definitely is too much vitamin D. And on that note, if you don't have a level available, you don't know what your vitamin D is, but you think that you need some, I cap it at 5,000 IUs a day. If you don't know where you're at, don't do more than 5,000 a day. And to be totally frank, I've seen people that took 5,000 a day and followed with their levels, and they crept into those 100 serum level ranges. So even with 5,000 a day, that can be too much for some folks. So that's where I definitely cap it. If you don't know what's going on, ideally you test it. It's just not an option for everyone. So if you suspect that you need vitamin D, I would say 5,000 or lower, unless you have some hard data to go off of.
I'm glad you talked about those numbers. I'm going to have to check my bottle and make sure that I stay well under the 5,000. I take 2 small gel caps a day. I'm also glad you talked about calcification, because that led me to a vitamin I was not going to mention, but you triggered it. K2.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to school here, and you're my teacher. Tell me how I do on this, because I'm trying to understand the concept. K2 actually takes the calcium and puts it where it should be, like into the bones and into the teeth, rather than going to the arterial walls. It's like, it's almost like a shuttle. Is that accurate? Oh, yes. For those who didn't see the motion he made, he gave me the Italian kiss, which means I did well on my test.
Yeah, it essentially, there's a couple proteins in our body that they do specifically that. So these proteins will, when activated, and that's called carboxylation. So when they're carboxylated, they will prevent calcium deposition in the blood vessels. So prevent that like calcium score from increasing. And then there are other proteins, when they're carboxylated, they're going to take calcium and put it into the bones. And K2 is what carboxylates those proteins. So if you don't have vitamin K2 in your body, those proteins, they're normally made in the body. They're just like kind of ramped up, but they're made in their uncarboxylated form, inactive. You need to activate them. K2 is required for that. So K2 and D3 are combined. This is something that people get wrong a lot. They think that K2 increases the absorption of vitamin D, or there's like some synergy there, and that's not really it. Vitamin D increases the absorption and mobilization of calcium. And then K2 directs that calcium, like you were saying, kind of puts it in the right places and keeps it from going in the wrong places. So when you take a lot of vitamin D on its own, you're moving that calcium around the body. And if you don't have K2, where that calcium goes is kind of who knows. And if you have chronically high levels of vitamin D, you're probably going to see some calcification in the blood vessels if you don't have adequate K2 to direct that calcium to where it needs to go.
Wow. Okay. Note to self, because I've been very diligent and compliant on my D, but I keep forgetting the K2. And K2, I think some food sources, if I'm not mistaken, are the Japanese foods like natto and yeah. I tried making some natto about 5 years ago in my pressure cooker. You know, you put the soybeans in there with the culture.
I consider myself, I have a really, my palate, I'm up for anything. I really don't think anything is gross. I cannot eat natto. I can't do it. I can't do it.
It does have
various other fermented foods can have a high content of K2, but yeah, natto is an incredible source. It's probably the single best source of K2 as MK7, which is a specific form of that K2. Very highly bioavailable, stays in the bloodstream a very long time. So yeah, if you can do it, just eat natto. I can't. So I tend to take
very distinct odor and or fragrance, however you want us to label it. But
I can't do it.
Yeah, it's got and the texture is definitely, the texture kind of reminds me of like eggplant. It's got a little bit of a slimy thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's an acquired taste. There's no question about that. And what were the other ferments? I remember I had in my memory that I had a Native American ferment. It was like a brown paste. I can't remember what it was called, but it was very tasty, and you can make a soup out of it. It almost tastes like Bragg's soy protein. I don't know if you ever tried the Bragg's soy protein. Mm-hmm. It has that kind of salty, rustic type of taste. It's very, very good. I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, it's a ferment. Just put in ferment into Google if people are trying to figure out how to get more K2. And speaking of ferments, let's talk about probiotics. That's another hot topic.
Oh, yeah.
Probiotics and prebiotics. Maybe if you wouldn't mind, I think a lot of people know sort of the 32,000 foot view of probiotics, but maybe just give us a quick, brief refresher, and then maybe tell us anything that Xymogen's carrying, because the microbiome seems to be everything. They're really leaking it to so much now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm at the point where if you have an issue somewhere in the body, let's look at what's happening in the gut, make sure that microbiome is where it needs to be. And then if we solve whatever problem is there and that other problem's still there, we'll go there and figure it out. But most times once you get that GI tract figured out, whatever else is going on tends to start fading away. So it's a big connection.
That's maybe one of the strongest things you've said in this whole series. I just think about that. That is profound.
Yeah. And I've seen it a million times over. Some really complicated thing. What the heck's going on? Okay, let's look at your GI tract. Ask them tons of questions like, oh, there's a bit of a problem there. Maybe do some testing, solve that small problem, and then things just kind of snowball in the right way and things start to get better, starting from that epicenter and going out.
Isn't that remarkable?
But yeah, so the microbiome, we have I don't even know the number. It's a bajillion microbes living on our skin, in our body. mostly focused in the colon, the large intestine. The stomach and small intestine don't really have much of a microbial presence. It's not really a good place for them to live. But in the large intestine, it's covered with bacteria. And that bacteria can be really helpful and synergistic and help the body to absorb foods and do a lot of really great things, create byproducts like butyric acid or butyrate that can help anti-inflammatory and do a lot of really cool things. Or we could have pathogenic bacteria that are just straight up tearing up the tissue and causing damage and preventing the body from digesting and absorbing properly. And then we can have some that are kind of in the middle. They're considered opportunistic. And that means that they're not really helping, they're not really hurting, but if there's too much of them, then they start to tip towards that pathogenic side. And we are always coming in contact with different bacteria and yeast and so many different things. We're swallowing them all the time. Sounds gross, but this is just the normal, this is life. They're getting in there all the time. And so it's always in flux, the microbiome. You could have some good guys one day, and then if you go on an alcohol and cake binge, if you do that for one day, you can see significant changes the next day. If you do that consistently for a few weeks or a month, you can totally tear apart the best microbiome that's ever existed. You can ruin it in a pretty quick amount of time. But then you can also switch it the other way too. If you switch over to eating what would be considered prebiotic foods, and that's fibers, broccoli, all of those good green leafy vegetables, those types of things feed good bacteria primarily, and they don't feed the bad bacteria, where sugar, alcohol, that type of thing, they feed the bad bacteria and they don't feed the good bacteria. So you can shift that balance either way. And when you're really in trouble, you can take a probiotic. You can actually take an exogenous probiotic. They're in yogurt. There's a lot of different ways that you can get probiotics. If you're taking it in a capsule form, well, we're talking a lot about supplements, so we'll get into a little bit of the science. I describe it like this. If you're looking for like the greatest basketball player in the world, you want Michael Jordan, who is number 23, who is on the Chicago Bulls in the 90s. You want all of those things. You don't want some random dude that happens to be named Michael Jordan, right? And so that's probiotics. So when you're looking for something and it says lactobacillus, that means nothing to me. I don't know what okay, what is that going to help? Is that going to do nothing? I have no idea. If you have lactobacillus acidophilus, still I don't know, because that is just a general family, right? There's a lot of different variations. And then you want the specific strain. So you want lactobacillus acidophilus LA14. And that tells you exactly the strain, where if you look at lactobacillus acidophilus, that's a dude named Michael Jordan. You don't know if he can dunk from the free throw line or hit those threes. So you have no idea. So you want to make sure that that strain is in there, and that will be on the bottle. If it's not on the bottle, it could mean a few things, but one thing that it means is they have the ability to change the strain. So even if they're a very responsible company and they're using the best strain that they can, and it says lactobacillus acidophilus, that's how it's labeled, they can use whatever strain they want that is lactobacillus acidophilus, and they are not all the same. So looking for strain specificity on the product that you're buying is incredibly important. If it doesn't have that strain, and I just mentioned one, there's HN019, LA14, there's so many, and even some identifying strains aren't necessarily the best in the world, but that's step one, is making sure you're looking at a product that has specific strains in there, because they're using consistent stuff every single time, and you can't change it. That is against the law. If it says LA14 and we're not using LA14, you've broken a law. That's a problem. So that's a major point. And there's lots of really good probiotic strains with a lot of research behind them. So on HN019, I mentioned that one. LA14 is probably the single most researched, maybe, or it's up there. HN019, that's a bifidobacteria species. I like that one a lot. But I think that's getting too nerdy, but just know that there are a lot of really good ones, but you want to make sure that you're actually getting a specific strain as opposed to just some random probiotic that someone threw in a capsule. You don't really know what it's doing.
Doctor, are there strains that are particularly robust, that are particularly tough and ornery and work for you going in? So, picking that L strain you talked about, is that the type of strain that can go in and kick the bad guys out, based on like its power and vitality, or are they all kind of the same?
No, they're very much different in a lot of ways, but that is one of them. Not only they're just like kind of strong and robust in that. One great analogy is there's only so many seats on the bus. There's only so much room in the colon. And so if you have a good, strong, synergistic, beneficial bacteria there, a pathogen is not going to come in and bump it out of its place. So those good strains, they adhere to the epithelium of the colon, and they live there, and they're very strong. And they also support the growth of similar synergistic bacteria around it. So when there's research looking at, you take this specific lactobacillus strain, and then bifidobacteria strains start to increase in growth. And bifidobacteria are also very beneficial species. So you'll see other good stuff start to grow, and you'll see the gram-negative and some of the more pathogenic strains start to decrease. So yeah, it prevents infection from others, and helps to support the growth of the other good bacteria. So among other things, influencing the immune system and digestion and absorption, things like that. But that's definitely a big part of it. Is they live, you can swallow them, they live through the GI tract, and they live all the way until they get to the colon, and then they grab onto that epithelium and they stay there, and they do helpful things, and they don't let the bad guys come in.
Wow, that's so cool.
It's pretty so cool. Yeah,
it really is. Do they replicate themselves and outpopulate the bad guys, or do you have to keep adding them in order to crowd out the bad guys?
Ideally, you put them in there and then they stay in there, and it's your job to feed them the good stuff. So again, if you're eating a good, healthy diet, a lot of the reasons good, healthy diets are good and healthy is because they're feeding the beneficial flora in your GI tract. And so if you're eating a lot of vegetables and those types of things that are known to help, they're prebiotics. If you're eating a lot of those prebiotic foods, then you're going to support the good bacteria. Alcohol destroys those good bacteria, sugar, and we're talking like actual sugar, not like an apple, that is stuff that's going to specifically feed some bad bacteria, and it really doesn't feed much of the good bacteria. So you'll shift that balance. So you don't need to take a probiotic all the time if you're doing it right. You might run into a GI infection. You might eat something bad. Okay, jump on a probiotic, kind of rebalance that microbial balance in your GI tract. And then ideally you get off of it and everything lives and grows, and it's this harmonious world.
You talked about the difference between sugar and an apple just now. And I know that can be a little bit confusing for most of us to understand, because fructose is still an ose, right? It's still a sugar. Mm-hmm. So why is an apple not as, well, I should ask you, is an apple good, bad, or neutral for the good guys? And if it is good, why is that sugar from the apple good for the good guys versus sugar is bad for the good guys?
I feel like we could just talk forever.
I know.
Yeah. So, okay. For one, if you take an apple and you squeeze out all the juice and you just drink apple juice, that's no longer a fruit, that's sugar. And the reason an apple is good, it's combined with fiber. It has all of those flavonoids in there. There's all of those other good things that are in that apple. But mostly, if we had to really kind of just make it super simple, there's a lot of fiber that's in there too. So that fiber slows down the quick absorption of the sugar, where if you remove that fiber, the sugar gets quickly absorbed into the bloodstream. And that acts like, just putting sugar on whatever, like a chocolate cake. So apple juice sounds healthy. Generally, not really. The preparation matters quite a bit, but to go to the grocery store, grab apple juice off the shelf, ooh. Even if it says no added sugar, look at how much sugar is in there. It's pure sugar without any of the good stuff about an apple in there.
Right.
So that's kind of the quick breakdown, is if you remove all of the good stuff about an apple and you just leave the sugar in there, yeah, that's bad. But if the whole apple is taken into consideration, good.
Hey, before I forget, as we're running out of time here, can you let the people at home know how they would get in touch with you or watch some of your videos? I know you have a very active YouTube channel, very active place, because I've seen quite a bit of videos on you. Maybe tell us about your browser, about Xymogen's browser, or any community groups people can get with Xymogen, a Facebook community group, any of your social media would be great.
Cool. Well, all my personal social media stuff is just Dr. James Monro, Dr. James Monro, Munro. And I make these videos and I just post them everywhere. I'm most popular on like Facebook and Instagram mostly. Nobody cares about my YouTube page, but they're there too, so you can check them out.
I'll make sure to get. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say Xymogen. You can check out Xymogen products. Xymogen.com, probably not spelled how you think it is, Xymogen.com. And then we mentioned WholeScripts. That's the distribution platform for Xymogen. So you can find Xymogen and a lot of my other favorite products on there. And that's WholeScripts.com.
Great. I'll make sure to get those links in the show notes too, so that people can just click down below when they're listening to the show, if they're watching on the YouTube, or actually if you're using your app, if you're mobile as well, you can use the links in the show notes there as well. Did I leave anything out? There's so much, like, I was tempted to say, can we do another show, but I want to be very, very respectful of your time. Like you're doing such great work over there in Orlando. Is there anything you want to make sure you just, like, a final thought to our viewers for their overall health? Because I know, like, you got into this because you're a healer. Anytime I meet a naturopathic doctor, an ND, they just got their hearts in the right place. They want to heal. They want to treat the problem, not the symptom. So any final messages? If
I had to give like a quick piece of advice to anyone that's looking to improve their health, it's try. Put some effort into it. Chances are, one small change that you could make that would improve your health. And as small as that change might be, try. Just do that one. If that's all do that. You know that you eat that brownie at midday. And if you didn't eat that brownie, that would be a little bit healthier. All right, make that change. So that's my advice. Just try. And then hopefully if you're in the position to be able to work with someone like me or someone that can kind of guide you in your health, that's even better. But just put some effort in, and it really will come back for you.
Well, so eloquent, so generous. He's such a giving guy. I highly recommend you guys go check out his videos. You do pretty much all these subjects at length, and it's ongoing. Do you do it weekly or how much do you update your videos?
Yeah, I put up a couple videos a week, and then I'll put up like a couple quotes or tweets or something like that. So every week there's like 4 or 5 new pieces of content I throw out there.
And that's awesome. We are speaking, of course, with WholeScripts Director of Clinical Services and Xymogen Medical Director, Dr. James Monro. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
And we're gonna have to jam sometime. I found out you're a musician, so we're gonna have to rock out, man. Bring the kids.
I'm in. Let's do it.
The information, including but not limited to text, graphics, audio, images, and video contained in For the Fighter in You, is for informational purposes only. No material on our show is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment.